Hey guys, what is up? My name is Megan and welcome back to my channel and welcome to the rest of my end of year series. I usually do these a little bit closer to the end of December, beginning of January. However, we're still gonna roll with it. I have already done the best books of 2020 and the worst books of 2020, which I will leave in the cards and description so that you can go check out the others in the series if you are not caught up yet. But today we're going to talk about all the most surprising books I read in 2020. I believe there are 10 on this list. Unlike my best and worst, they will not be in any particular order, so we're just going to hop on in. Also, I'm feeling extra lazy today, so I'm not going to actually hold up the book. We're going to go with pictures because it always makes such a mess. The first most surprising book I want to talk about is Darling Rose Gold, and this is a book I was kind of interested in, and it's one that I ended up loving. It's not usually my genre, which is why I was surprised I loved it so much. Essentially, this would be considered like a mystery thriller. It is an adult novel, and it follows the storyline of a girl who essentially her mother was her caretaker, and her mother intentionally made her sick so that our main character would always rely on her mother, and she did not know that, but once it came to light, obviously her mother went to prison, and so it follows the storyline of our main character. Is it our main character and her mother, or just... Yeah, I think it's the main character and the mom, and there's the dynamic of before and after the prison, and I was just completely blown away. Obviously, this is something that happens in real life. It has happened, there have been cases, and it's always something that has intrigued me because the psychological elements that go with it and like how it impacts people and the dynamics of a relationship like that were so intriguing to me, and I loved the kind of mysterious elements and the fact that our main character had kind of gray motives when it came to what she was planning with her mother when her mother came out of jail, because they did stay in contact afterwards. And there was just something about this book. I've never read anything like it, and this is a book that introduced me to the fact that I do enjoy mysteries and thrillers, which I did not think I enjoyed any of them, and it kind of opened my eyes to the genre, which I read more of in 2020. Definitely super surprised by the writing style, the plot, the development, everything about this book I really enjoyed. I think I gave that book 4 stars, and overall it was like a remarkable read and so surprising to me since I hadn't really dipped my toes in that genre before. Similarly, once I started reading thrillers, I just had a moment where I couldn't stop, and then I read The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which I feel like either you love or you hate. There's no in between with that book, and I ended up on the love. This was a 5-star read, and I didn't put it in my top 10 of the year because I don't quite think it made it to the top 10, because this is not something I would reread, because once you know the twist, like you know the twist. But this is a novel that follows a multitude of different perspectives, and this is basically a wedding weekend that we follow. The book starts with someone being murdered, and then you flash back to earlier in the weekend. Some people are getting married, so it's the wedding party, and they're on this like secluded island, I believe in Ireland, and the atmosphere is very gray and dark and stormy. And what surprised me most is how I could enjoy a book with so many perspectives, and the fact that none of the characters are actually likable, and I still ended up loving it. I did not expect any of the twists and turns. Obviously, I am new to the thriller genre, so maybe it was me, but I have seen other people on BookTube who read thrillers a lot give this book 5 stars, and I just think it was so unexpected, and to have such atmosphere and intrigue in a thriller just completely blew me away. And I was obviously surprised by the ending and just surprised overall that I loved it so much. But it's just, I've never read a thriller since that had all these like the creepy mood and the storm and the secluded island. They're all things I really have learned that I enjoy, and I guess I found myself as a reader going through these thrillers. Obviously some of them also made it to my worst of the year, which again, watch that one if you want to know more about it, but this one definitely surprised. Then we have 2 books which I'm combining together because I'm cheating, and that is the Brown Sister series by Talia Hibbert. These are 2 romance novels. We have Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Take a Hint, Danny Brown. The 3rd book will be coming out in March, and these books surprised me because usually when romance novels have so much hype, I end up being slightly disappointed or just so afraid to pick them up that I never do. And I was really surprised with how much I could connect to the characters and how substantial these romances are. I'm not the kind of person who says like romances are trash or they should be guilty pleasures and they're not like worth reading. I love romance. It's what I read most of now. But I think that the inclusion of mental health and chronic illnesses really surprised me because it made me feel so much more attached to the main characters and everything seemed a little bit more real and raw. And I think that the emotion that I got in both of these books really did surprise me because I don't usually get so attached to main characters or love interests, but everything about both of these books were absolutely amazing. The first book, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, follows a main character named Chloe Brown who has a like near-death incident and then she decides to create a list of things to get a life, and we have the superintendent of her building where she moves at, which is one of the things on her list, and he helps her complete it, but Chloe also has a chronic illness and so obviously life is much harder when you have a chronic illness, and it's like her navigating life with that, also relationships. And then in Take a Hint, Dani Brown, we have a lot of discussions on mental health and anxiety and so many different things and the ways different people process it, and it's like a fake dating trope, and everything about those two books I absolutely adored. Again, I was just so surprised with how much I could care for characters without knowing them for so long, and I just wish there were more than 3 books in that series. The next one on my list is probably one of the most surprising ones, and that is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Nouvelle, more specifically the audiobook of that book. But I'm not a sci-fi reader. I have read a few books in the Lunar Chronicles series and a few sci-fi books here and there. However, this for me completely changed the game, and I'm especially happy because Sylvain Nouvelle is a Canadian author, and so I love supporting fellow Canadians. This is a sci-fi series, as I mentioned, and it follows different characters. It's told through interview formats and just different things. It kind of reminds me of the Illuminae Files or things like that, which I wasn't a fan of, so it's even more surprising that this series for me, as of now, was like 10 on 10 would recommend. And essentially we follow this woman who, when she was a child, got a bike for her birthday. She went for a ride and fell into this huge metal hand, and years later she's actually the one who is in charge of the team trying to understand what the metal hand is, where it came from, and it all goes from there. It's a lot of secrets and different kind of pieces you need to put together, and like the whole team and the dynamic, and the audiobook is a full cast narration, but I just didn't think I was one to enjoy sci-fi, and I feel like 2020 for me was kind of the year of finding out my different tastes, whether it came to adult romances or sci-fi or thrillers, and it just blew me away. I was so enthralled the entire time, and I just cannot wait to continue on with the series, but this was definitely a hit for me. The next book I have to talk about is Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory. I never remember which one it is. But this one I think is more of a predictable surprise, but why this made it to my list is because I had tried in the past some other works by the same author in the same kind of series. This is like the wedding series, like the wedding date series. This is book 5. You can read them out of order. They are companion novels. But this one really blew me out of the water because I feel like the writing style of this author has severely increased. Like, I was not a fan of the writing. I DNF'd some of her previous books or gave them like 3 stars maybe, but this one I gave it full 5 stars to. I could not stop reading that book. The romance, the fact that the characters were a little bit older, and like the things they have to go through. There's a lot of discussion on race and interracial relationships. It follows a main character who is a lawyer. She's named Olivia, and she's like around 40 years old, and she's starting her own practice. She moved from New York to LA, I think, and she meets the senator of California, and they kind of end up in a relationship, but it's all about being in the public eye when you're a woman of color, and there was just so many things, and I think that the fact that this book was so layered and the romance was just so adorable, I could not believe I loved one of her books this much, which makes me even more excited to try more of her books out in the future. Obviously, I do know I love romance, I just didn't expect to love that one as much. Another romance book, which this one I would consider more like new adult, and it is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, I believe is the name of the author. That one was a surprise because for the first 100 pages, maybe a little bit less than that, I considered DNFing the book. I was not enjoying it. The writing style really wasn't jiving with me. I think that because it is by a British author, I was having a little bit more of a hard time getting to love the characters and understand like the dynamic of the book. But then I completely fell in love with it, and it ended up like, oh my god, I just loved it. The characters, the friendships, the dynamic, everything about this book ended up being so incredibly good. And I just want to say, if you started this book and weren't sure if you were a fan, I would consider keeping going, because wow, was this fun. I laughed out loud and I had such a fun time, and I guess it was surprising to me that I could have such a rocky start with the book and end up completely falling in love with it and its characters. This has a lot of red, white, and royal blue vibes because it follows a main character named Luke, whose parents are like C-list celebrities. Like, they aren't the most well known, but they are still in the spotlight, and he does not have the best reputation, and in order to fix that, he goes out with this other boy. Is his name Oliver? I think his name is Oliver, and he has like a goody two-shoes reputation, and so it's fake dating that turns into real dating, and oh, I would 100% reread that book at any time. And it was just so surprising to me that in the span of just a couple hundred pages, I could go from not loving this book at all to absolutely adoring it. We have two more books to talk about, the second to last one being Mistletoe and Mr Wright by Sarah Morgan Taylor, which this book I know is not everyone's cup of tea, but what surprised me most about this book is that the first book in this companion novel series, which is The Tourist Attraction, was a DNF for me, and I just could not get to love the characters or the town or any of the dynamics in the first book. However, fell in love with the second book. Mistletoe and Mr Wright follows secondary characters from The Tourist Attraction, and in that one we follow Lana, and I did not like her as a side character, but once I got to read from her perspective and understand where she's coming from, it completely changed the game for me. And I don't know what it is about the book. I think the characters and the romance was much sweeter, and I could connect to the characters, and their backstory is more, I don't know what it was, truthfully. I don't have much more to say. I've talked about this book several times, but it was definitely a surprise that we can go from like a DNF from a book in the same world to a 4-star. Like, that was a huge surprise. And the last book I have to talk about is The Rest of the Story by Sarah Dessen. This is a surprise, yes and no, because this is a YA novel. Sarah Dessen is very well known. I just think that I hadn't heard a lot of people talk about it. I had tried reading a few pages of that book once, and I was just like, it looks to me like it's pretty average. But then one day I started listening to the audiobook, and that audiobook was absolutely amazing. I could not listen to it fast enough. I loved the lake vibes in this one, and the main characters, and the friendships, and the family history. And I just think that, again, similarly to Boyfriend Material, how sometimes on a first read a book is like, but I guess it's like your mood that's not completely into it, and then I reread it and like read it in like not even 2 days and fell in love with it. Again, I don't know why. I guess it was my mood, but it just surprised me that I can go from like a to a 5-star read. So that's it for all my surprising reads. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what your most surprising read of 2020 was, or if you don't know, just leave me a animal emoji, any animal, in the comments below, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye guys, happy reading.